The sharp scream of metal tore through the sky as Commander Elias Viper Kale jinked hard to the left, his fighter plane barely evading the hail of bullets from the squadron pursuing him. His HUD flashed red as warning signals blared. His altitude was low, his fuel reserves were dwindling, and the Shadow Fangs, the enemy's most ruthless and cunning aerial combatants, were still behind him. Each member of the squadron had a reputation as a killer, and they hunted in the skies like wolves. "Viper! They're closing in!" crackled the voice of Captain Stella Raven Corbin through his comms. Her desperation was palpable, her words punctuated by the grim roar of her afterburners as she dived to intercept the Shadow Fangs. Elias gritted his teeth as he pulled his joystick, banking hard, weaving between scattered debris from earlier engagements. He had lost 3 wingmen today, 3 good pilots, and he wasn't about to let Raven fall next. Not like this! The Shadow Fangs squadron was infamous for their cold precision. They had carved their reputation into the clouds, mastering aerial strategies that seemed too complex for human minds. Today, that unfortunate soul was Viper. Elias Kale had been a fighter pilot for nearly 10 years, surviving every imaginable aerial dogfight. He thought he had faced it all. Missions against ace pilots, engagements in storms, deep cover reconnaissance flights. But he had never seen anything like Shadow Fangs. They didn't just hunt their prey. They played mind games in the sky, forcing their enemies into deadly puzzles. Precision flying, decoys, fake signals, it was warfare ratcheted to a new level. The leader of the squadron, Jace Phantom Vren, was said to fly as if his plane were an extension of his mind. His tactics defied expectation. Phantom never attacked head-on. Instead, he chipped away at enemies' defenses, forcing them into deadly traps. Few who saw his plane, the Black Reaper, lived long enough to describe it. "Raven, where's Maverick?" Elias shouted over the comms, his voice cracking under the pressure. "Maverick's gone," Raven cried. Her tone was somewhere between grief and fury. Elias swore. Maverick, his second in command, had been a flyer you could count on. Steady, analytical, unbreakable. If the Shadow Fangs had taken him down, then they were even deadlier than Elias feared. "Listen to me, Raven," Elias barked. "Stick close. Don't break formation. We can't afford to split up. That's their game." "I'm low on ammo." Raven fired back. Elias looked to his right and saw her jet streaking toward him, smoke trailing from the right-hand engine. "And my flares are gone!" "Hold steady, Raven." His words were cut short as warning lights ignited across his cockpit. Phantom had locked him. Elias jerked his plane downward in a heart-stopping plunge, positioning his tailgun to spray a desperate volley into the fading sky. It bought him seconds, but no more. The Shadow Fangs began their signature move. A chilling scream rolled across his radar as enemy fighters emerged from the clouds in a calculated pattern. 4 jets! Perfectly triangular formation! And then, a sudden split. One peeled left, jerking his radar off balance. Another climbed high, disappearing into the sunlight glare. Phantom, no doubt, sank low into the dark part of the horizon, cool and patient. It was a classic Shadow Fang maneuver, breaking radar logic and forcing the enemy to scatter. "They're boxing us!" Raven yelled. Elias, say something. He couldn't. His breath hitched as the puzzle began to unravel before him. Desperation clawed at his mind, but Elias was no novice. Phantom's voice crackled across the comms, cutting sharply into interference. The missiles streaked for the false signatures, detonating in brilliant plumes of flame. The explosion rocked Elias's fighter violently, nearly tipping him out of its trajectory. "Clever move, Viper." Elias froze. He knew Phantom's reputation as a hunter, but hearing his voice, a low, calm cadence, was worse than knowing he was hunting. Phantom didn't panic. Phantom didn't rush. This was his game. Raven's jet roared in beside Elias, her voice panicked and breathless. "They're circling back! Elias, what do we—" Before she could finish her sentence, an explosion rocked the horizon. Elias turned in horror to see a black jet streak past Raven's wing. Phantom's jet. Her plane began to spiral, smoke billowing from its shattered engines. "Raven!" Elias screamed, but her comm system had gone dark. He watched as Raven's fighter nosedived toward the jagged peaks below. Whatever hope had held Elias together seemed to splinter in that moment. This was no longer just war, it was survival. Elias inhaled sharply, his mind racing. The Shadow Fangs were relentless, but they thrived in predictability. They relied on their prime strengths: box maneuvers, coordinated traps, and baiting fear. Every puzzle had a solution. Elias simply needed to unlock theirs. Phantom wanted him boxed, but the box could be broken. Be unpredictable, Elias told himself. Be unpredictable. He slammed the rudder hard to the left, forcing his plane into a spiraling corkscrew. Below, Phantom's squad faltered for a fraction of a second. Not long, but long enough. Phantom himself veered into focus behind Elias, his silver-fanged jet a shadow against the clouds. Elias hit altitude limits as Phantom locked him. The HUD began flashing red, fuel alarms now undeniable. The Shadow Fangs would pin him within seconds. But Elias smiled grimly. Not today, Phantom. It was a suicide plunge as Phantom's lock alarm began screaming behind him. Elias knew Phantom would finish him now. Chasing him too low into the mountain range would ruin Phantom's perfect record. The missile streaked for Elias, and he twisted at the last moment, pulling his fighter behind a jagged spire. Phantom's missile detonated against the rock wall, the blast lighting up the mountain range. But Elias wouldn't revel in victory. From his radar, and from the scream of jets descending, the rest of Phantom's Shadow Fangs were back into formation, complex, deadly, unrelenting. He was surrounded now, truly boxed, no escape left. In his heart, Elias knew that flying meant accepting risk. It meant adventure, sacrifice, but it also meant knowing when a fight could not be won. His squadron was gone. Raven was gone. But perhaps his sacrifice could mean something. Perhaps it could force Phantom's shadow-hungry squad into revealing their plans to the upcoming reinforcements. Elias took a deep breath as the first jet locked on, then the next. The HUD blurred into red chaos. In the final moments, he pushed every ounce of energy from his battered jet into one final climb toward the heavens, toward the fading sun that framed the horizon. Behind him, Phantom's voice crackled once more.
Goodbye, Viper.
Elias closed his eyes and smiled. He had fought fiercely, flying free until the last. The missiles screamed, the cockpit rocked, and Viper's brilliant fighter plane burst into a fleeting constellation above the mountain's shadowed walls. Phantom closed formation, his dark squadron streaking away. But even he did not forget the pilot who had challenged the skies with fire and fury. And somewhere, scattered in the winds whispering between peaks, Viper's legacy rose from the ashes,